Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Having some issues with my camera, so it's going to be off for today, but we are going to be breaking down week 24 of fantasy hockey. For a lot of you, this is your final playoff week. This is your championship finals. For me, it is, and I know that I need to make the best ads possible. I need to have the best players on my team that I can possibly have, and I'm going to help you guys do that today. So let's dive right into it. Now, the interesting thing about this week is that the heavy nights are not too heavy. I mean, Saturday is still a really heavy night. You likely are going to have to sit players on Saturday, but Tuesday and Thursday aren't too bad. So there's a chance that you can have an open roster spot on Tuesday or Thursday. If that's the case, then off nights don't matter as much for you. This varies for everyone. I mean, personally for me, Tuesday I have like 1 or 2 roster spots available, and then Thursday I don't have any roster spots available. So you gotta look at your own schedule and figure out which players slot into those nights. Sunday isn't considered an off night because there's 18 teams that do play, but I think a lot of people have available roster spots on Sunday. So if a team has a game on Sunday, you probably can fit a player into that. But like I said, you got to check yourself. With all that being said, if you do happen to have a lot of players on those teams that play on those heavy nights like Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, then having players from these teams on this list could be very beneficial. A team like the New York Islanders, they have 2 official off nights out of their 4 games, but Sunday might be an off night for you as well. So that's 3 off nights. If you have a lot of players on the Islanders, that is going to be beneficial for maximizing your games compared to players on a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning who play like Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. It is going to be way better to have players on the Islanders. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about adding and dropping players this week. Even though the Islanders don't have the best opponent goals against average, they've been scoring a lot of goals, so I suspect that their players will do decent. And then at number 2, we have the Florida Panthers. They have 4 games and 2 off nights. There is a chance that Thursday you could have an open roster spot, so maybe they have 3 off nights, but still, really good schedule because there's not a lot of teams with off nights this week. They also have a really high opponent goals against average, and the Panthers already score a lot of goals, so I suspect that the Panthers players will put up a lot of fantasy points for you this week, so definitely beneficial to have them on your team. Then we have the Colorado Avalanche. They only have 3 games, but they have 2 off nights with a great opponent goals against average. What you can do with the Avalanche players is pick them up for the Monday and Wednesday game on those off nights and then drop them come Thursday. They play Anaheim on Monday, so that's going to be pretty good for Colorado Avalanche players. And then another good team, they are number 4 on this list, the Minnesota Wild. They don't have the best opponent goals against average, but like Colorado, they play Monday and Wednesday on those off nights. Guys like Matt Boldy and a couple other Minnesota Wild players have been overperforming lately, so maybe they keep this hot streak going and get some fantasy points on Monday and Wednesday. That is always a good option. There are 2 other teams that have 2 off nights this week, the Buffalo Sabres and the Arizona Coyotes. Unfortunately, they play Monday and Friday as their off nights. It's not really good to hold a guy from Tuesday to Thursday and they don't play at all, right? So if you make ads for Colorado like Monday and Wednesday, that's more beneficial because you can drop those players Thursday and maybe pick up a guy from Arizona or Buffalo on Friday to get those off nights. It's still not bad to hold the Arizona and Buffalo players because you get 2 off nights. That's always beneficial, but I generally think you probably want to stream players from these 4 teams specifically. Now, these are the teams with the least amount of games, and like I said, the schedule's a little bit different. You might have open roster spots on those heavy nights, Tuesday and Thursday, so this isn't as bad as it has been in previous weeks, but still probably not ideal if you're looking to gain a slight advantage on your opponent. If you have 5 or 6 extra games in your opponent, that could decide your week. So you got to take that into consideration. The number 1 worst team is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like I said, worst opponent goals against average 2.58. However, the Lightning do score a lot of goals, so they might be better than a team like the Chicago Blackhawks, who have a slightly higher opponent goals against average, but they're a much worse team. Then moving down the list, we have the Predators, the Blackhawks, the Sharks, and the Golden Knights. Generally, it's not the greatest to have a lot of players on these teams because if you have a lot of players on these teams, you're going to have to sit 2 or 3 players on those heavy nights, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So think about dropping some of those mid-tier players on these teams in favor of players that have a really good opponent goals against average or have a really good schedule in terms of off nights. Now, moving on to the best opponent record, we have the Dallas Stars. They only have 3 games, but a .488 opponent record is pretty good. I suspect a guy like Jake Ottinger to do really well this week, and also the players because they are playing pretty bad teams. And then we have the Bruins, the Panthers, the Flyers, and the Flames. Guys like Jeremy Swayman and Allmark should do good, as they always do. A guy like Bobrovsky could do pretty well. Carter Hart, Jacob Markstrom. I will talk about goalies in a little bit, but definitely keep an eye on goalies from these teams and also some of the players. And then for the worst opponent record, we have the Minnesota Wild. And yes, I did tell you guys that Minnesota Wild is a good team in terms of maximizing your games because they had that Monday and Wednesday off night, but they really have a tough schedule this week. Guys like Philip Gustafson and Marc-Andre Fleury, who are fantastic fantasy goalies who make a lot of saves, they might underperform this week. So you got to take that into consideration when you're thinking about adding and dropping players, specifically goalies. I'm not telling you to drop those guys, but definitely keep that in mind. They might not do as good as you would hope they would. And then we have the Blue Jackets, the Islanders, the Red Wings, and the Predators. Sorokin, Ville Husso, Saros, they might underperform this week. I don't even know who's the starting goalie for the Blue Jackets at this point. It might be Tarasov or Elvis, but either way, you probably don't want those goalies on your team regardless. But yeah, it might be a tough week for some of these teams. Now moving on to the highest opponent goals against average. These are teams that are playing teams that let in a lot of goals, which means their players are likely going to put up a lot of fantasy points. Starting with the Calgary Flames at number 1 with a 3.50 opponent goals against average. This is absolutely incredible. They play the LA Kings, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Anaheim Ducks. So I expect the Flames to put up a lot of goals. Then we have the Flyers, who play teams like the Montreal Canadiens, the Buffalo Sabres, the Ottawa Senators. So even though the Flyers aren't the greatest team, don't have the best offensive weapons, they could overperform this week. You have guys like Owen Tippett, who's been playing really well. That could always be a good option to have on your team. Then we have the Edmonton Oilers, who have the best offense in the league. This opponent goals against average is surely just going to be the cherry on top of the cake for the Oilers, for players like Leon Draisaitl, Evander Kane, Zach Hyman, Connor McDavid. These guys always do good, but I expect them to do even better than they normally do with this schedule. I really expect big things. Playing teams like the Arizona Coyotes, the Anaheim Ducks, the Los Angeles Kings, teams that let in a lot of goals. Then we have the Florida Panthers, a team that also scores a lot of goals, who happen to play teams that are pretty bad this week. I expect them to put up a lot of fantasy points. And finally, the Boston Bruins, another team that has a great offense, playing really easy teams. You definitely want players from these teams on your fantasy team for this week. Now, these are the teams with the lowest opponent goals against average. Having players from these teams could be detrimental to your fantasy week. Nothing is set in stone, obviously, because you have a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning on here who scores a lot of goals, so it kind of balances itself out. But nonetheless, these players on these teams are likely going to underperform. You don't want a lot of them on your team. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Washington Capitals, the Detroit Red Wings, the New York Islanders, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. I'm not telling you to drop players from these teams, especially because I just told you earlier that the Islanders have a fantastic schedule for maximizing your games. I think the best approach here is to drop mid-tier players from teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Washington Capitals, who not only have a bad opponent goals against average, but no off nights this week. Now moving on to the streamers to help you maximize your games this week, I want to reiterate this point to help you guys understand something. If you have open roster spots available on Tuesday and Thursday, then adding players from this list might not be that beneficial, right? You might want to add players from teams that have a really high opponent goals against average. Players from teams like the Philadelphia Flyers might be better options because they have a really high opponent goals against average. They have 4 games and only 1 off night, but again, if you can fit them into your lineup, then they might be better than a player from a team like the Islanders, who have a great off night schedule but don't have the best opponent goals against average. So keep that in mind if you are making ads this week. However, for those that do have really heavy schedules on Tuesday and Thursday and you want to help maximize your games, these players are going to help you do that. So let's start it off with Brock Nelson of the New York Islanders. They play Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday might be an off night for you, and Brock Nelson is a fantastic player, one of the most underrated players in this league. Then we have Carter Verhaeghe and Sam Reinhart of the Panthers. The Panthers score a lot of goals. They have been fantastic as of late. They have 2 off nights. They have a good opponent goals against average. Love these players for this week. Then we have more Islanders players, Anders Lee, Bo Horvat. I know Horvat hasn't been great since getting moved to the Islanders, but he has to get out of his slump at some point, and maybe this week is the week that he will. So I think it's worth taking a gamble on Horvat. I personally did in one of my leagues. I think he is going to score at least 1 goal this week. I really hope he does. We will see what happens. And we have Sam Bennett of the Florida Panthers. Yes, I know he is injured right now, but Paul Maurice said it is going to be a short-term absence. So if he is back, I think he's a great option. especially if your league counts peripherals, because he takes a lot of shots and makes a lot of hits. Then we have Noah Dobson, potentially 3 off nights this week. Pretty decent player in terms of putting up peripherals, getting some points. He's on the first line power play. And then we have Valeri Nichushkin, Joel Eriksson-Ek, JT Compher. They both had those off nights Monday and Wednesday. It is going to be really beneficial to have them on those Monday and Wednesday games and then making ads after them. Maybe you want to drop them after the Wednesday game. That is up to you. Then we have Kyle Palmieri, John Gabriel Pajot, and Pierre Engvall. And these Islanders players in the bottom 6 are actually producing more than the top 6 as of late. I don't know what's going on. I think John Gabriel Pajot had like 3 points the other night. It might have been Kyle Palmieri, but either way, these players are doing really well as of late. Pierre Engvall has 5 points in 11 games, I believe, since coming to the Islanders. Usually those players get a boost when getting traded, so he could put up some points this week with 3 off nights. That is going to be pretty good. Then at number 14, we have Anthony Duclair of the Florida Panthers. He has not played the best since coming back from injury. He only has 1 goal in 11 games, I believe, but the fact is he's getting back into game shape. I think he has 2 assists in the past 3 games, and right now he's on the first line with Matt Tkachuk and Alexander Barkov, so the opportunities are going to be there. And if you know Anthony Duclair, he is a guy that can score a lot of goals. He's a really good sniper. Maybe he can find his groove this week. With 2 off nights and 4 games, I think he's going to be a fantastic option. Now, these are more players that can help you maximize your games. We have Ryan Hartman, Bowen Byram, and Jared Spurgeon. Like I've said before, having those games on Monday and Wednesday and then potentially dropping those players could be good for maximizing your games overall. Ryan Hartman's been really picking it up lately. Bowen Byram is pretty consistent. Jared Spurgeon is okay, but he puts up great peripherals. So these are decent options. Then we have more Florida Panthers players, Lister Rynen, Aaron Ekblad, and Gustav Forsling. Lister Rynen could be a really good option if Sam Bennett is still injured, because he will slot in on that second line. Aaron Ekblad has been pretty bad this year, but he has the ability to put up a lot of points in that firepower Florida Panthers offense. He's no longer on the first line power play, but there's still opportunities for him there because he does play a lot of minutes every night, and he puts up good peripherals as well, so maybe he can have a really good night here or there this week out of those 4 games. And then Forsling, who's also a solid player, could put up some points this week as well. Then we have Zach Parise, who's been playing really good as of late out of nowhere. With 3 off nights this week, there's a chance he could really help you maximize your games. Then we have Colorado Avalanche players Evan Rodriguez and Dennis Malgin. Rodriguez has had some trouble lately in producing, but the opportunities are there in that top 6. The Avalanche do have a pretty good goals against average, so maybe Rodriguez could have a big night. We will see what happens. And with Malgin, he did have a couple of really good nights in the last 2 weeks, but he is right now on the 3rd line. I'm looking at daily faceoff. That is subject to change, right? They do mix up their lines. I don't know if he's going to keep that up, because if you're looking at his career stats, he is not a high producing player. We will see what happens, but it might be worth giving him a shot based off what he was able to do last week. And then lastly, we have 3 Minnesota Wild players, Marcus Johansson, Frederick Gaudreau, and Oscar Sundqvist. Gaudreau is a pretty solid bottom 6 player, so he is going to be a good stream in those deeper leagues, having that Monday and Wednesday off night games. And then Marcus Johansson and Oscar Sundqvist, since getting moved to the Minnesota Wild, have produced really good. I mean, Johansson has 9 points in 12 games. Sundqvist has 7 points in 10 games. So we'll see what happens. I mean, the ice time is there. The deployment is there. So maybe they could keep that up. We will see. Finally, let's talk about goalie streamers for this week. Again, these are going to be goalies that might be available in some of your leagues. I'm not going to include goalies like Linus Ullmark or Jake Ottinger, who have really good opponent records this week, because they are not going to be available. But a guy like Jeremy Swayman might be available because he is splitting starts, and for some reason he has been available in my leagues here or there. People have dropped him because he doesn't start in the split as he usually does. Sometimes Ullmark gets 2 games in a row, or because he doesn't play that well in some of the games. However, he is probably not going to be available because he just posted back-to-back shutouts. Boston has been on a roll, as they have been for the majority of the season. But if he is in a more shallow league, they have a really good opponent record, and he is likely going to get 2 starts this week. There's a good chance that he gets 2 wins this week and a lot of fantasy points. Then we have Carter Hart of the Philadelphia Flyers, and this guy's been playing really good lately in terms of fantasy points. The Flyers have been squeezing out a couple wins here and there, but the fact is he makes so many saves because the Flyers get absolutely peppered with shots. He also is getting more volume as of late. He was losing starts in the past couple of weeks and months, but it looks like he's been getting more starts lately. So I think with that opponent record, Carter Hart could make a lot of fantasy points this week. And then we have Stuart Skinner of the Edmonton Oilers. He's been getting the majority of the starts as of late, other than back-to-backs, and he has played pretty well with 4 games this week and a .538 opponent record. The Oilers are on a roll. I think Skinner is going to be really solid in terms of getting those wins potentially and also making a lot of saves. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button below if you are not subscribed, and good luck this week, guys. This might be your final week of fantasy playoffs. Months of hard work, making those ads, making those trades. Hopefully it is all going to pay off and you guys win the whole thing. May the fantasy hockey gods be with you. I hope they're with me too. I hope luck is on our side. Like always, have a good one.